Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got today, Rick?
We got value picks for tight ends and quarterbacks.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, guys? My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always.
What's up?
How you doing, Rick?
Just peachy. You know, football.
Peachy. I thought you said PG, and I was like, what the heck are you talking about, dude?
I'm feeling like Paul George in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Nothing but net.
Hey,
no, I mean, I'm excited because, training camp starts this week. So,
I usually get to sit there and, analyze every freaking video that comes out about players that I like while OTAs are happening. There has been a lack of OTAs this offseason. So this is the first actual football activities that we get since the NFL draft, really.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely exciting for us fantasy nerds. But
yeah, dude.
It's also exciting just to have football back.
Also, in what day is it? The 27th? In just under 25 days, we have our draft, our home league draft.
Oh, shoot.
The draft I prepared everything for. Just to win once. Just to taste victory. Just one time. I tell you, commissioners never win. They never win.
Our listener league will probably be in August too, right?
Yeah, dude. Totally forgot about that. Before we jump into our value picks, and then we'll get to some news after that. Before we jump into our value picks, though, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions. You can follow us individually on Twitter. The handles are somewhere on the screen. Like us at facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform, please leave a review and share this great podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and leave a comment down below what your favorite player that we discussed on this episode is. And we also have the draft guide. The orders for the draft guide come in at $25. We talked about it a million times. You got to buy the draft guide. It's cheap. It really is cheap. Like, what can you buy for $25 that you're just going to completely waste your money on? Trips to McDonald's? Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, Chipotle I would probably take Chipotle over our draft guide, to be honest with you, but that's just me.
But it is like, what is that? A trip, maybe two. I mean, if you go with like your girlfriend or something, that's like one trip to Chipotle versus the entire draft guide.
Do you know how much money I spend at Chipotle?
Okay, for you,
not healthy.
It's like pays for like half of your first Chipotle trip.
Yes.
But for most people, pays about one trip to Chipotle.
So
versus the draft guide.
If you're new to fantasy football, you're like, what is a draft guide? It has all of our content in it to help you win your league. We have full rankings, breakouts, bust, player breakdowns, player draft values, and so much more. If you order now, you will be entered in for a chance to be in our listener league for the 2020 season. So be sure to buy the draft guide and try to beat us in the listener league. Let's jump right into value picks. We probably talked about some of these players before. So if you've listened to our podcast before, you know we love some of these players. So we're just gonna reiterate why we love them. We actually haven't talked about one of these guys too often, but we'll get to him in a minute. Let's start off with Matt Stafford. Obviously, Rick put a My Guy tweet. You know what drives me crazy about that is half the people who do the My Guy thing don't even realize what it actually is. It's a segment started by the fantasy footballers, if anybody listens to that podcast. And everyone does My Guys, and I'm like, do you even know what that means? But anyway, you had Matt Stafford as a quarterback My Guy, and he's number one on our quarterbacks value pick list. Because of injury, held him out of the season for a majority of the season last year. What, he played 10 games, 8 games?
I think he played 9 games.
Player Profiler says he played 8, I believe.
He played 8. He did play 8. Yeah.
So his ADP is at 110, and if you were to take the 8 games that he played at the beginning of last season and just pace them out, or not pace them out, but I'll give you the rank of where he was in the first half of the season. It was quarterback 10 overall through those 8 weeks. I'm going to pull one game off it.
It's through week 1 through 9. He was the QB6. I think it's because they had a bye week.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm miscalculating that. Thank you.
No, you're good. I think he was like 4th too in points per game average, 4th or 5th.
You might be right.
I think
probably 4th or 5th. Probably 5th.
I have the list right here. Oh yeah, Mahomes had him beat by 0.3 points.
Freaking A, Mahomes. But anyway, his ADP right now is 110, and he's going off the board as, I want to say, the 15th or 16th quarterback, something ridiculous like that. I want to just confirm that before I say it out loud. Well, I already did.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I
already said it out loud, so it is what it is.
I think there's around like 14, 15 quarterbacks that are getting taken ahead of him. I know like Fantasy Pros, I believe, has him ranked 12th, so they have him ranked higher, but he's usually going around.
Yeah, he's the 14th quarterback off the board.
Yeah, which is a little low for me. I think he should be higher.
But it's safe to say that Matt Stafford is a value pick at 110. Seeing what he did in the early part of the season, like we just discussed, where he ended as the QB6, he was top 5, top 6 in fantasy points per game. And what he was doing over the course of the first half of the season was insanely good. I think there was a stretch where he could have been, I think if like there's a span of like 4 or 5 games where he could have been a top 4 quarterback or something like that. I think he's capped. We've talked about before. I have an infatuation with rushing quarterbacks in fantasy football. I don't think Matt Stafford can do that very effectively. So I think his ceiling is kind of capped at that number 6. But if you're going Ricky Lemon strat, drafting a old quarterback and then a younger quarterback in the later rounds, or a more not older quarterback, but an established quarterback, somebody who's going to get you good enough production to start the season, and then draft maybe like a Gardner Minshew or a Daniel Jones or something like that a little bit later, or you might have to draft Daniel Jones earlier now. I don't know. I haven't been keeping an eye on Daniel Jones's ADP, but regardless of the situation, you can draft a younger quarterback who might break out this year and get your steady horse in Matthew Stafford in the later part of the draft at pick freaking I want to say the 10th, 11th round in a 12 team. So, I mean, I think it's a great value pick. Yes, there is a chance that he completely poops himself this year and just isn't the same quarterback, but I think, with the talent he has around him, with Kenny Golladay, with Marvin Jones, you add DeAndre Swift, you still have Kerryon Johnson, you have TJ Hawkinson, you have a good offensive line. Like, all the pieces are there for Matt Stafford to play well. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I mean, that's the thing with Stafford. I get the concern with him because he's been injury prone throughout his career.
Man threw a touchdown with a broken shoulder.
At the same time, I think that's kind of a myth when people say he is injury prone throughout his career. Yes, he has got injured before, including this past year. But did you know he played in all 16 games for 7 straight seasons from 2011 to 2018?
Wow.
He played in all 16
This is the
games.
facts that we need. You even brought those facts.
So, and like he has had down years recently, like 2018, he didn't have a great fantasy year. 2016, I don't think he had a great fantasy year. But you remember, like the talent around him has been brutal since Calvin Johnson has left. And now it's finally, this is probably the best offense, at least, that he's ever been a part of. The offensive line improved slightly. They added, I believe they drafted 2 guards and a center in like the 3rd, 4th rounds in each draft. So they've added some depth pieces to the interior line. Yeah. Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones are obviously there. TJ Hawkinson is going into a 2nd year. They added Danny Amendola last year. They now added DeAndre Swift, who is an elite playmaker and is very good in the passing game, which was one of his best things. I mean, going into the draft, I remember we were talking about on the show how you love Jonathan Taylor, and I really like Swift and Dobbins just because pass catching wise. I love Taylor too, but a different discussion for a different time. But either way, DeAndre Swift's going to help Matt Stafford a lot. Kerryon Johnson is still there. There's a lot of talent around that offense. And if he just stays healthy, he was on pace for almost 5,000 yards last year, like 4,998 or something like that, or 96, like in that range.
Yeah.
He's on pace for 38 touchdowns, so almost 40 touchdowns last year. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but when you get a guy in that 10th, 11th round range, I mean, he's going to be a pretty safe bet if healthy to be like a top 12 fantasy quarterback. Go ahead of him. Ben Roethlisberger, like people in that range, like to me, I think he deserves to be in that like Matt Ryan range, and he's like the 8th quarterback off the board, like the 8th or 9th guy. So he is a very good value where he's going.
Yeah, you dropped for like maybe 5 seconds there of dead space. So if you're listening on the podcast and you're like, what just happened for 5 seconds? He dropped for a second. He's on a phone call.
That's my bad, I guess.
That's all right. You're totally fine. We got your point, though. I did want to pace out Matt Stafford over the course of, oh, my word. Pace out Matt Stafford over the course of the games that he started last year. Because you did mention that he had, what was it? He was pacing at 40 touchdowns.
40, around a little less. Yeah. It was 38 touchdowns.
But 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns is crazy. And he rushed it for 132 yards, which is not, that's not nothing to like write home about. Yeah, that's an extra 13 fantasy points to your total, but that extra 13 fantasy points can mean the difference of you getting to a higher, finish, I guess. But I think the biggest thing with Stafford is that I don't expect him to put up gaudy numbers this year like that. I think he could hit 30-plus touchdowns. I think he could hit 4,500-plus yards. And stuff like that.
Sure.
And I
don't think he's going to throw 5,000 yards and touchdowns.
Like 7, 8, or 9, a 7, 8, or 9 finish next season is way higher than the 14th, 15th quarterback off the board.
The thing with Stafford too, it's not even just that. It's just the fact that I think his floor is pretty high. Like you're almost guaranteed to get a solid, especially 10, if you're in like a 12-team league. He's going to be a solid quarterback that you can start on a week-to-week basis. Where a guy like Baker Mayfield, and even I love him, but even a guy like Daniel Jones, like you don't know if you're going to get that.
No, you don't. And I think like if you're taking that route where you're just going to draft a rookie, like probably I'm going to, or not draft a rookie, but a young guy. Right. If you're going to end up doing that like I am, then I'm anticipating streaming for the early part of the season until something interesting happens. You know what I mean? Last year I got my quarterback off the waiver wire, Dak Prescott, in a majority of leagues. And he ended up, a top 5 quarterback. So it's like, you don't have to draft a quarterback, but if you do like taking that strategy, I think it's a great value in the later rounds to take, to take Matt Stafford. I did want to say, another fantasy point that I've been another statistic that I've been playing around recently. You know how I have my fantasy point per touch for running backs, fantasy point per target for wide receivers, fantasy point per drop back on playerprofiler.com. Gives you an interesting little perspective on how many fantasy points a quarterback actually gets in relation to like how many dropbacks they have. And he was at number 5 in the NFL last year in fantasy points per dropback. So with 580 passes, if he stays at that efficient level, he could definitely finish as a top 7 quarterback easily. In 2016, he played all 16 games and he was at 0.34 with little to no weapons in his arsenal. So now that he's got guys and he's got the ability, like just to give you more perspective, his receiver target separation as a team last year in 2018 was 1.32, and in 2019 when he was on the field playing, it was 1.24. So he was actually better with less target separation, but that just comes with better receivers. So overall, I think he's got really great potential to break onto the scene this year, and actually, if he gets a full season, to be a lot better of a quarterback than people anticipate, especially in the 13th or 12th or 13th round. Let's talk about number 2 quarterback. We're going to talk about 3 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends. The second guy I was referencing at the beginning of the episode, Ryan Tannehill, is I think he's a great value. I don't know.
I'm with you on this one. Even though I'm not,
I haven't decided. Like we were taking a long time, by the way, to decide what we wanted to do with Ryan Tannehill, and this is it. This is our time to decide what Tannehill's going to be.
I'm going to say this right now. This is my opinion on Ryan Tannehill. If he was going earlier and if he was getting overhyped, I'd be staying far away from him. Which I remember, like in March, when like those very super early mock drafts are going on, he was getting drafted as like the 9th, 8th, 7th quarterback in fantasy.
Right.
And that was insanely high. Now where his ADP is he like the 17th, 18th, 19th ranked quarterback, like in that range with his ADP?
Yeah. Somewhere. I mean, he's in 10 team. He's getting he's going basically undrafted.
He's one of those players that I don't even have like a strong opinion on for him being
21
good,
QB.
But
21.
I'm drafting him in that spot 10 out of 10 times. Because for the simple fact of like last year when he took over Tennessee, he was the 3rd ranked quarterback in fantasy. I mean, he was really good when he took over Tennessee last year. Is that a one-hit wonder? Yeah, very well could be. But you're sitting there in the 15th round.
The question that you have to ask is he better than the 21st quarterback? Like, is he going to finish higher than 21?
Yeah, if he's healthy, absolutely.
So that's why you have to hit smash on the draft button when you see him on your board, is because he is an incredible 14th, 15th round value in 12 team. And it's like, if you can get him off the board just for generic reasons we've talked about in the past, I'll go over the numbers in a second of what he did last year in the time that he started for the Tennessee Titans. And he wasn't even that efficient through the air. It was just what he was doing in combination with, passing on the ground that was making him a lot better fantasy-wise. But it's like, even if you just look past that, I think he can finish as a top 15 quarterback all day. I think that's easy for him. But it's like, and if you're saying that's like, for me, I think that's generally speaking, 15 to 17 is probably his floor, then that's 6 quarterbacks ahead of where he's getting drafted right now. And it's like, even if he doesn't end up as a great quarterback, you know what I mean? You're getting somebody that, worst case scenario, you can, I mean, I don't like to hold multiple quarterbacks on my team. So I think in the worst case, he's a streamable
he's somebody guy. For somebody with your strategy, if you like to stream quarterbacks, Tannehill's a perfect guy to like draft in the 15th round that you can drop after week 1 if you want to, and then start streaming.
And see what he does.
Right. And the one hit wonder thing that I would just argue against, because I have heard a lot of people make that argument, including me. I've even made that argument. But it's not like he's a complete one hit wonder. In 2014, he was the 8th quarterback in all fantasy.
Yeah.
In 2015, I want to say he was top 12. I'm going to confirm that real quick. But he's done this before.
He's also he's
had top 10 seasons.
He's also been in an offense that has just been garbage in Miami. So it's like he finally has an offense that is somewhat slightly decent. And it's like, if he can actually come out, and perform in a full season like he did last year over the starts that he had, I think it was the back half of the season. I mean, he can be a lot better.
Right. I mean, 2015, I don't think he was actually that. He was the QB 17. So
yeah,
that's still though. Like, if you're drafting him as the QB 20, like he's probably going to be, like, I think he has that upside to be in the top 12, top 15. Because again, the QB 3 last year in 2014, he was the QB 8. So he has done it before. And then in 2015, he had a solid season. And then injuries obviously affected him. So could he stink next year? Absolutely. But could he be good?
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's worth the risk. Going in like the 14th, 15th round. Like,
yep.
It's totally worth it.
And I've talked about his pacing statistics before, but 4,100 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions is what he was pacing at last year. And he was also pacing at 64 rushes for 290 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns.
See, that's the one thing that I don't expect.
I think the rushing yards will be there.
The rushing touchdowns.
The rushing touchdowns will not. So him doing what, like, if you look at over the course of those games that he started, I believe it was week 7 through 17. If you look,
he played in week 16, but his first start was, or week 6, sorry. But his first start was week 7.
So if you just look at his starts and where he finished over that time, it was top 3, like you said. So I mean, when you're looking at the numbers here, that's what he would have to do to finish top 3. I don't think he's scoring 6 touchdowns on the ground. I think he could score 4 next season. That's not unreasonable. Maybe 3. But like when you got Derrick Henry and you have a bowling ball like that in the red zone, you're probably not going to be calling a lot of pass plays in the red zone for Ryan Tannehill or RPOs for Ryan Tannehill to get into the end zone. So I think he's going to rush his normal amount, probably get 275 to 300 yards, which is, a decent floor on a week-to-week basis to get you. Like, what I noticed with him is that he was getting about 18 fantasy points a game, 17 fantasy points a game on passing, but then he would get 2 to 3 extra fantasy points that would get him past that 20 threshold, which is what you're looking for in a 4-point touchdown league for quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
So it's like, that's kind of what I look for. My quarterbacks, I want 20 points out of that guy, because if it gets up to 20 points, then you're for sure, like, there's a good chance that you're beating the other team at the quarterback position. You know what I mean?
For sure, yeah.
So I think for Tannehill, it's just a matter if that continues. I don't think it does, but like just looking, like we talked about, the numbers that he had over those 10 starts, he was the QB3. And it's like, even if he regresses a little bit and becomes like the QB7 over that span or the QB8 next year, that is far better when you're getting him at the QB21 in drafts.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, unless he really, really stinks, like gets benched, kind of stinks. I don't really think.
What did they just do? Pay him $100 million?
They did, yeah. They paid him a lot of money.
God, I hate when
he's got to
do
really
that.
stink next year to get to where his ADP value is.
Yeah,
and it is possible. Like, don't get me wrong.
He has to be Baker Mayfield.
Right. I'm not a big Tannehill fan, but
yeah,
with where his ADP is, that's fantastic value.
Yeah, and then the fantasy points per dropback, I just wanted to note that for the quarterbacks right now is the 0.62, which is number 2 in the league, which is crazy. So
yeah,
I think, obviously the drawback with Ryan Tannehill is that you look at the pacing numbers for last year, 432 attempts paced out to a full 16 games. Is what he would be at, and an average quarterback usually. Like we just talked about Stafford. Stafford threw 580 attempts paced out last year. So he's 150 attempts less, which I think is the biggest concern for Ryan Tannehill, is that if he doesn't reach 500 passing attempts, that could damage his ability to finish as a top 10 quarterback, which I think is the concern for him. But I think, when you're basically spending 0 draft capital on him, you can, like 14th, 15th round, you can hit that and hope he actually succeeds.
Right.
Let's talk about another guy that came on. We haven't talked about him. We haven't talked about Tannehill a lot, and we haven't talked about Cam Newton a lot. We talked about Cam Newton when we were bragging about him. As Patriots fans, but that's about it. Cam Newton is an interesting. We talked about him a little bit, I think, a couple weeks ago. He's a little bit of an interesting player because you don't know what to anticipate. Last year, when he was on the field, he did not look right. His shoulder was off. His throwing motion was off. He was throwing basically just ducks. Like, I could have thrown better passes than Cam Newton was at the end of the season. Like, he was not good. And so that was kind of drawing him back a little bit. And then, you know what I mean, he went into the offseason, all the stuff with the Panthers went down, he ended up getting cut, and now he signs with the New England Patriots. So the real question with Cam Newton is, to me, it's not necessarily if Cam Newton can have success. It's is Cam Newton going to be healthy? I think that if he starts for the New England Patriots and he plays a full 16 games, he can finish as a top 10 quarterback. Easy. But I think it's a reality of, is he going to finish the season? And I know a lot of the New England. So there's some New England reporters that are saying Cam Newton's not going to start for the New England Patriots. He's going to start for the New England Patriots. So get off that train. It drives me crazy.
As long as he's on the roster, he's going.
As long as he's on the roster, he's going to start week 1. So if he's healthy, I think he's going to be Cam Newton. We talked about full 16. I talked about it last year. I talked about it a little bit this year in the time that we spent on Cam Newton. Cam Newton has always been a top 5 quarterback when he plays a full 16 games. That is within the realm of outcomes for Cam Newton if he plays full 16 in New England. I think that Josh McDaniels and the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick are far greater offensive minds than the garbage cans that were coaching the Carolina Panthers. And I don't mean any disrespect to Ron Rivera, but I really do think Cam Newton can be a lot better on the Patriots.
Ron Rivera.
No, I know. But just Cam Newton was really good, but I think the Patriots can make him better and utilize him for what he is. So, I mean, you're talking about like what Cam Newton is. We've talked about Josh Allen scoring a lot of rushing touchdowns. Josh Allen is literally a carbon copy of what Cam Newton is. Cam Newton gets in the red zone. He just rushes it in. So is that good for Sony Michel? No, we're not talking about Sony Michel. We're talking about Cam Newton. So Cam Newton scores 6 rushing touchdowns if he plays a full 16-game season. Heck to the yeah. And if he does that, you're talking about 500 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns. Like he for sure finishes as a top 5 quarterback with that. So I'm not saying he's going to. Like I could think I for one think he's probably going to only play like 12 to 13 games this year. But if he plays a full 16, there's no reason why you can't expect the realm of possibility where Cam Newton ends up as a top 5, top 6 quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before on the show. I love Cam Newton with Josh McDaniels, and as you were saying, I like the designs that they're going to use. The argument is that they have no weapons. I don't really buy because in Carolina he didn't have any weapons either. And you can make the argument that the weapons, at least receiver-wise, even though it's not very good, might be better than what it was in Carolina 2 years ago when he was healthy. I want to say DJ Moore was a rookie last time in 2017.
Yeah.
Or I don't think DJ Moore was even drafted yet. In 2017, the last time Cam Newton was healthy. I believe that was McCaffrey's rookie season, so that was pretty much all he had.
Yeah.
But here at New England, like he's not going into a situation with a ton of weapons, but he's still got Julian Edelman. Mohamed Sanu is fully healthy. If N'Keal Harry can take a year or 2 jump, then he's going to be solid. So he does have some talent there. James White is somebody who's going to get overlooked a lot, but he's going to fit really well with Cam Newton. And then, like as you said, in games in the seasons that Cam Newton has played all 16 games, he has never finished outside the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And you want to say like that's really only the beginning of his career. I mean, 2017 is not that far away. And like in 2018, the first half of 2018, I think he was before he got injured, he was a top 5 fantasy quarterback as well. Yeah. And then he just got injured, played poorly the second half of the season, and then didn't play last year. So the last time we've seen him play a full 16, he was the QB2 in all of fantasy behind Russell Wilson.
I think that lends itself to his ability to rush the football. You know what I mean? And I think that in this NFL nowadays, it is. I don't think there's a world where he finishes top 3, but I think there's a world where he finishes top 5. But I think the rushing is going to get him there. You know what I mean? He's never been a guy to get you talk about let's go back to what is it? 2018 is the last season he was able to not play full 16, but he played 14 games.
Right.
In that season, he only threw 3,800 yards, 27 passing touchdowns. This is paced out to a full 16, by the way. But he did rush for 115 times, at 558 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. That's what gets him over the hump in terms of what he needs to do fantasy-wise.
Right. Worst rushing seasons.
Right. Career. But it's like when you look at his full career numbers, he has never thrown 4,000 yards in a season. Like I want to say.
Oh yeah, I don't expect him to do that in New England. But I honestly think he could have even more rushing touchdowns. Like, do you think
he threw 4,000 passing yards in 2011.
But that was his rookie
season.
Other than that, he's usually not. But with Josh McDaniels as the offense coordinator, I feel like there's going to be a lot of designed plays for Cam Newton inside the 5-10 yard line for him to just run it in. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, Tom Brady, who's the slowest guy in the world, is like the QB sneak master, but he consistently would get like 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns a season.
Yeah.
Just off like goal line plays. So I could see Cam Newton getting around like 6-7 rushing touchdowns next year if he plays a full 16 games. And if he does that, he's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback.
His best, he's higher. Well, if he gets the rushing touchdowns, he's higher than top 10. But in 2011, he had 14 rushing touchdowns. 2013, he had 6.
That was the anomaly because I think that was his rookie season.
Yeah, but in 2015, he had 10 rushing touchdowns, which is 4 years later.
That was his MVP season, I believe.
So it's like and then like the season after his rookie season, 2012, he had 8. So it was like the seasons where he didn't finish
in 2017, and that wasn't that long ago.
In his 16 games, like in seasons where he started all 16 games, he had 14, 8 rushing touchdowns, 6 rushing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, and 6 rushing touchdowns. So he scored 6 or more rushing touchdowns in every single year he had 16 or more fantasy points. 16 or more games started. So for me, it's like when you look at Cam Newton, like I would honestly say it's almost with, especially what you just brought up with New England, like enjoying rushing the football in the red zone with the quarterback. For some strange reason, they will get Cam Newton the ball when they need to, and I could see 8 touchdowns going his way or something like that if he plays a full 16. Now, I'm not saying the Patriots offense is going to be good. I'm not saying that Cam Newton is going to be an elite passer again. I'm just telling you the facts that are placed in front of me, and I really do think Cam Newton is a great value.
For sure.
Especially when he's like, I think he's the 18th quarterback off the board right now.
Right, he's somebody that you can draft in the last two rounds, and then if he gets cut by the Patriots, you just cut him. Or if he gets injured, you just cut him. Like he's not. There is no risk to drafting Cam Newton.
And what I'm noticing in the later rounds of 12-team drafts right now, it is a minefield of nothing. And I hate to make fun of certain people, but all I've been taking in the later rounds is like quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers. There's no running backs. The wide receivers are weak. No. And like at this point, there's some good quarterbacks and good tight ends, but you can't just keep taking quarterbacks and tight ends in those rounds. So it's like it's just been a weak late round strategy. And if you want to take Cam Newton in the later rounds between 10 to 15 and, hope for the best, you can do that. And it's like if he ends up a top 5 quarterback this year, then you hit the nail on the head. But if he ends up getting cut week 1, like you said, Rick, just cut him.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like all 3 of these guys that we've talked about, Tannehill, Cam Newton, and Matt Stafford, are all guys I'm trying to target and redraft this year as like that late round veteran guy.
Yeah. Let's talk about some tight ends, just 2 tight ends. I wanted to add Jonnu, but...
I'm kind of glad you didn't. Even though I like Jonnu, I just...
Okay. I didn't add Jonnu for your sake. If we want to talk about 6 guys, Jonnu would have been on the list, though. Number 4, a little bit more interesting. We're going to talk about in-depth Mike Gosicki, but there is some news surrounding the Dolphins that will probably be discussed in here. So we'll just skip that news segment section. But the Dolphins did acquire tight end Adam Shaheen from the Bears in exchange for a 6th round pick. So they added some depth at tight end. We will talk about that in a second, but I just wanted to throw it out there before we jump into the news in a minute. Because we are talking about Mike Gosicki. Now, Mike Gesicki's ADP is 144. He's at 12th. I've seen him go off the board in the 11th and 10th round in mock drafts on Sleeper. So I think he's anywhere between 10 and 15, depending on what people know about Mike Gesicki. I think it was 3 years ago was his rookie season. I think this is his 3rd season in the NFL.
He's going into his 3rd year, yeah.
He is just we've talked about it before. He's a freak athlete. There's quite 6'6", literally
250.
The interesting thing is that the amount of people that are excited about Preston Williams this year because of the splits they saw last year, and I'm like, can we please stop talking about an undrafted freaking rookie free agent from last season?
Undrafted players. There's plenty of.
There are players that start.
Players.
Name 2 really successful undrafted wide receivers.
I'd have to look it up. Not gonna lie, but I'm sure there
I just don't think Preston Williams is that good, especially in Miami. So it's like
I'm not a Preston. That's not why at all. I don't like Preston Williams. Because I don't care where you get drafted usually. But
yeah,
I'm not a Preston Williams
guy.
And
I care
he's getting
who you're
overhyped.
Playing for. I guess. I just think he's an undrafted free agent on a team that probably isn't going to have the greatest offense in the world. Like they're going to be a better offense than they were last year. But I think Mike Gesicki's a freak athlete, and Albert Wilson's not taking reps away from him. Like I don't think Preston Williams is going to get overtly targeted. Instead of Mike Gesicki.
Was an undrafted.
Was he really? I don't think so. I think it was like a 6th round
maybe
pick.
He was like a 6th round pick.
But anyway, so my point is, I think Mike Gesicki's the 2nd target on that team. If you were checking especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick starting, if you were checking reads, it would be Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, And the second Gosicki gets, like I talked about this last year with my guy Darren Waller, is literally after Antonio Brown left or got cut by the Raiders, they were left with Tyrell Williams. And it was like, who's the second guy on the team? And they want to target the tight end position, right? So it's like the way that I look at Miami is I see Mike Gosicki as a very similar situation to Darren Waller because he is the second target on the team, and he's on a team where the quarterback really does like to throw it to the tight end position, right? So it's like I think a talented tight end like Mike Gosicki can do really well, and that just remains to be, it just remains to be seen. But when you look at the back half of the season at the tight end position, I will just give you weeks 8 through 17. He started playing really well, and he was the tight end 6 over the course of those 10 games.
They got rid of Rosen was officially done starting for them, and they stuck with Fitzpatrick.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how long Fitzpatrick's going to last next year, but if they
go to Tua, that might be better. That honestly might be better.
I don't know if it would be better. Rookie quarterbacks don't really like to throw it to the tight end position. That destroyed Noah Fant last year, having Drew Lock come in. I don't
know if that's necessarily true. Depends on the scheme. Because also, like, it can be a security blanket too. He might not get a lot of yards.
I guess it depends on the scheme, but I think players coming out of college getting trained not to target the tight end position and target skill players.
No, that is true. Yeah, I mean,
he might immediately gravitate to Gosicki in the beginning of the season, but I don't think he's going to start until at least week 10. I really like. I think they're going to roll with Fitzmagic for as long as they freaking can. I don't think they want Tua to play a snap this year. Starting the season. Unfortunately for your dynasty team, but
I think he'll play, but it won't be till like week 8 or 9.
Yeah, but I think if Fitzmagic's going out there and he's winning games at least, I don't think Miami has any interest in sticking a rookie quarterback out there to. Like if they're like let's say by week 8 they're like 6-2 or that's a little outrageous, but say they're 5-4 or 5-3 and they're doing well, they're not just going to replace Ryan Fitzmagic because they. I agree with you there. I'm thinking if their offense is going to be efficient, I think they'll just stick with Fitzpatrick because they don't want to get Tua out there too early.
Right.
But regardless of the situation, I think Mike Gosicki has the ceiling of being a top 5 tight end this year, especially seeing what he did in the back half. And then knowing that he's a guy that you can snag between picks 10 and 15. I mean, you add all that together, he's definitely a really great value pick at the tight end position. And he's a guy I'm snatching up as in many leagues as I can to, hope for the best. I mean, who's our writer, Adam Hutchison, he keeps snatching Mike Gosicki and TJ Hawkinson back to back every single draft. It's a good strat. I mean, it's not a horrible idea. One of them's going to work. So
that's what I'm doing in most of my leagues. Yeah, I mean, I like Gosicki a lot. I've talked about him before. I compared him to Austin Hooper. I think he's very similar in that sense. And I also think, when we talked about Hooper last year, we were like, well, look at his year-by-year numbers. He keeps getting better, keeps getting more targets. They're built similar as well. I think they're very similar type of players. And last year, Austin Hooper had a breakout year. I think this can easily be Mike Gosicki's breakout year. He's going in his 3rd year. He's 25 years old.
Yeah.
In his rookie year, he had just 32 targets, wasn't crazy involved. Last year, he had 89 targets. I mean, I could easily see that number going up to like 100, 105, 110 targets, like going up each year.
Right.
He is going to be the second guy behind Devontae Parker. I don't think it's going to be Preston Williams. Like you said, undrafted guys don't usually end up being a top guy. I had to look it up, and the only guys in recent memory that ended up being kind of top wide receivers, and even then they weren't really, was Danny Amendola and Victor Cruz. Usually an undrafted guy is not. There's plenty of undrafted rookie or undrafted
Brown was a 6th round pick, correct?
Players, but what did you say?
I said Brown is a 6th round pick, correct?
Yeah, so he was a late round pick. 6th or 7th, I think, but he was drafted.
So ridiculously good, though.
Gosicki's going to be the second guy in that offense. And obviously, if Fitzpatrick is there, we know Gosicki has top 5 potential written all over him. If Tua comes in and plays sometime during the season, I still am not, I get the concern And I do generally agree with you. You do make a good point where, the rookies aren't used to throwing to tight ends. But I also think when he's the second best option, he'll still get targets.
Yeah,
especially like over the middle of the field on designed plays.
Do you think Adam Shaheen is a problem?
Adam who?
Adam Shaheen, the guy they just traded for.
No, I don't.
Okay, all right, yeah, I agree.
He's just gonna be like a blocking tight end.
I just wanted to get to it.
He might get like 10 receptions, but he's not gonna be. He's gonna be a classic like second or third tight end on a roster.
Yeah, agreed.
No fantasy involvement, but solid.
Let's talk about our last guy, T.J. Hawkinson at ADP 146, right behind Gosicki, which I don't understand. He went from being drafted way too high last year to way too low this year really quickly. Yeah. He was very disappointing in a lot of ways last year. He had some brick hands. Probably should have caught like 7 touchdowns. But he just dropped them. I don't have the drop counts in front of me. I'd love to know where he landed among drops at the tight end position. But anyway, he had a 54% catch percentage. And I don't know if that's simply because his quarterbacks were just straight garbage for a majority of the season. Or they just, or he just wasn't that good. His true catch rate, according to Player Profiler, was, let me just pull it up, 74%. His target quality rating was number 33 in the entire NFL. And his catchable target rate was 72%. So only 43 of his 79 targets were catchable, which is horrible. I mean, so 43 of his 59. Your question
about him being kind of having, because he did have some drops last year in the red zone as well.
Yeah.
But does that partly make you feel better about?
Yeah. I think it's. I mean, that first game of the season was kind of like the tie against Arizona was the biggest like surprise for me, because he came out and like the team that drafted him in our league, I mocked him for drafting Hawkinson, and then he goes out, gets 131, 6 catches and a touchdown, and I'm like, are we really going to be watching this all season? And then it didn't pan out like that. But
right.
I mean, he almost caught 2 touchdown catches in that game. So that game alone, he would have had like almost 30 fantasy points by himself. You know what I mean? And it's like, he is that good when you target him. And I think that there were games where he was just really, like, he was targeted 11 times in his last game of the season, week 13. He caught 6 passes for 18 yards, that's horrible. That's just straight up bad. There's not really a lot of times that you can find where he was really good last year besides game 1. But the biggest thing, that there's 2 things for me with TJ Hawkinson. A, he was a first round pick in the top 10.
Yep.
So that kind of like, there's always been concerns for me where you have Marvin Jones, you have, Kenny Golladay. He's going to be the 3rd target on the team. And that does concern me a little bit more than not. And I don't think the running backs are going to overtake him at all in terms of, there's just going to be dump offs. Like, Hawkinson will be the 3rd guy in this offense, but it's concerning that he is the 3rd guy. You know what I mean? And so that was one of the concerns that I had, but I think he's a top 10 pick. So I think he demands target share. You know what I mean? I think he demands 110 targets just because of where he is, how big he is, how good he is at the game of football. I really do believe that TJ Hawkinson is just going to demand that target share. And then the second thing is he was horribly inefficient last year. It was, like I said, the 54% catch rate is just bad. And I think that has a lot to do with rookie wide receivers, rookie tight ends having a very hard time figuring out offenses and figuring out how they can perform effectively in an offense for the majority of their rookie season. There's not many guys that just click automatically. He was injured. He got hurt at one point, but I think for him, I think it was just him understanding the pro game, like kind of connecting the dots there, and he didn't have a quarterback for a majority of the season. So I think in his second year, he's going to have, a full year of NFL experience under his belt. He's going to have the playbook under his belt, and he's going to have Matt Stafford for 16 games. So I think all of that kind of accumulates into him having a much better 2019 campaign. I do think he's a little bit more of a stretch to think that he can finish in the top 5 just because he hasn't done it. But I think that there's a real shot that you could actually get a decent top 7, 8 tight end this year from Gosicki. I mean, from Hawkinson, I should say. And if he blows onto the scene and ends up with 8 touchdowns and 1,000 receiving yards, and he's the next Travis Kelce, then there you go. But I think he's decent at the value that he's getting drafted at.
Right. I mean, an interesting sort of statistic I looked at the other day was since 1996, I believe there has only ever been 5 tight ends to finish in the top 10 for rookies during their rookie season, and one of them was Gronk. One of them is Jeremy Shockey, some all-time players. So usually 99% of the time, even if they're a great tight end, they don't have a great rookie season.
Yeah.
Like Travis Kelce, George Kittle, look at all the tight ends.
Yeah,
the top tight ends right now, Mark Andrews, Austin Hooper. It takes them a year or two to really get going.
Yeah.
I think TJ Hawkinson is going to have a great year this year. I understand Marvin Jones is there. Kenny Golladay is there. I think he's probably going to be the third option. You could debate him and Danny Amendola all day. But I think he's still going to get, first of all, he's going to be much more efficient this year with Matt Stafford being his quarterback full time. That offense, the Lions, I know a lot of people hate the Lions and hate the Lions because they disappoint them every year. And I'm not saying they're going to be a great football team because they could very easily go 5-11.
Good offense.
But that offense is legit. They're going to score points.
Yeah.
And they're going to get touchdowns. And I think TJ Hawkinson, he is the best red zone threat as well. I mean, Kenny Golladay, you can make the argument for him.
Yeah.
I think with the best corner on him, and they might even double team him, TJ Hawkinson is going to be a red zone machine this year. I mean, he had multiple drops last year in the red zone. I think he had 2 or 3. And what he did in week 1 last year, I think we're going to see a lot of that in year 2.
I think it just shows you what he's capable of.
Sure.
That's the only game that we have where we can just get sweaty about and freak out. But I think Hawkinson's ridiculous.
You look at he wasn't really involved in the game plan in the next few weeks, and I think when they wanted to start getting him more involved is when Matt Stafford went down.
Yeah.
I mean, when Matt Stafford went down, he had 3 catches on Thanksgiving.
He
had 1 catch the next week. 0 catches.
How do you justify targeting a guy 9 times? He gets 6 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown, and then just completely write him out of the game plan for 3 straight weeks following that?
Because he's a rookie tight end.
Yeah.
He's not a rookie tight end anymore.
I hope that happens every week and we get ridiculous tight end for the entirety of the season. It's like the next Gronk or Travis Kelce or George Kittle or something like that. Yeah. I hope that's what he is.
I mean,
that's what his ceiling is.
Absolutely.
I think Gosicki can be a top 5 tight end like Austin Hooper, but I think TJ Hawkinson can be one of the best tight ends in the history of the game.
Kittle and Kelce for sure. Yep, agreed.
But let's talk about some news just really quickly and end the program. The NFL accepted the NFLPA's demand of 0 preseason games ahead of the 2020 season, so we will not be watching football until September 10th.
Kind of sad, but I'll
September 9th, maybe?
As long as football is there.
As long as there is football. So there will be football in this
I haven't watched a preseason. I usually don't watch the preseason. I was going to watch the preseason.
That's what happens when you start actually doing insane amounts of research. And you spend the entire offseason projecting, and then you get excited. I literally watched probably 30 preseason games last year out of pure excitement. It got so boring after the first 12 minutes, though.
I bet, yeah.
But anyway, it was interesting to see you don't get those weird situations where people started. I think
I
last year
I watched a lot of highlights of the preseason last year, individual players.
Yeah.
I just never watched
David Montgomery, though, was a 6th round pick or a 7th round pick, and then he scored a touchdown and he was a 4th round pick the next week. And it's you're just not going to have that in redraft.
Yeah.
Which is a lot better, I guess. But there will be a 2020 season. I don't think it's going to be, as the next couple weeks play out, we'll see what happens. There were some situations with the MLB and COVID cases and, and then, obviously Twitter goes hyperbolic on everything and says that the NFL shouldn't have a season. And it gets a little crazy, but I think if the NFL starts, they're going to finish. And it just depends on if they start on time, Thursday night, September 9th or 10th. I can't remember what date it is. If they start then, the season's going to happen in full. So I wouldn't be worried about that, but we are 6 to 7 weeks out from that happening. So 6 to 7 weeks of this whole friggin' COVID situation has been anything can happen realistically. Free agent Devonta Freeman's player rep said that his client would likely find a new team in the immediate future. They predicted the end of July. So we are in that week. We'll let you know if anything happens with Devonta Freeman. The rumored teams are the Eagles and the Bucks.
Just quickly, because I remembered this is another piece of news that's kind of similar. But Sean McCoy has also said he wants to return, and there's apparently interest from the Bucks.
Oh, man, dude. You know, Devonta Freeman's going to end up an Eagle.
Ew.
And I'm going to be so mad. I'm going to be like, just going to have to throw all of my Miles Sanders love in a
I have
trash
so much
can.
love for Miles Sanders. He's like one of my favorite guys right now.
We literally would have to adjust.
Any shares of him in any league because he's getting so expensive.
Yeah.
And if they sign Devonta Freeman, I'm just going to sit back and be like, well, I might have been wrong, but at least I don't own any Miles Sanders shares. I mean, even if they sign Devonta Freeman, he'll still be good, but he might not be like that.
Yeah, he's going to be the same. I think he's going to be a little better than he was last year. But it's just he'll get the same target share through the air, and he'll probably rush 200 times, but he's not going to get 300 touches. That's for sure.
Right.
Let's move on to the next piece of news. We have the Washington Redskins are now the Washington football team because they were too lazy to come up with a new name. So there's that.
Their jerseys.
Are you excited to refer to them as for the entire season as a football team?
I've heard people compare.
Can we say that football team beat the Patriots?
The Washington football. Yeah,
Washington
I know it is weird for sure. I've heard people compare it to Chelsea's football club, in soccer.
Yeah,
and that makes me feel a little bit better about it. But I still
we're not
think
completely stupid.
But it's still dumb. It's still really dumb.
Yeah.
Their jerseys look like Madden generic jerseys.
That's true.
You create a team and then you didn't edit their jerseys. That's what it looks like.
Oh my. The 49ers are expected to restructure, or the 49ers did restructure Raheem Mostert's contract. So there's no trades. He's staying with the 49ers. Are you still excited about him now that you got to rethink your love?
I'm not really crazy about him, but
yeah,
I think he's going to be solid.
I think the big thing for him is that there's I think he has, I think a writer for, I think it's Bobby Sylvester from Fantasy Pros wrote an article. I could be wrong about the writer, but anyway, they wrote an article on Fantasy Pros top 12 league winners, and Raheem Mostert was one of those. And he said Raheem Mostert could be a top 5 running back this year. My question is, I don't actually disagree with him on that front. I just think that at the chances of that happening are probably slim. And if you're using a 4th or 5th round draft pick to get him, and then he ends up just being like a Shanahan running back that just completely disappears, you wasted a 5th round pick. So I think the value is too much. Like if he was 6th or 7th round pick in 12 team, I would be all on board with him. But at this point, I think it's just too much draft capital to be spending on a running back where you have you have the Shanahan question of is he going to start him full time? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that really quickly. I just wanted to end the program.
Yeah, no, I mean, I it's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
And they have so much talent there with Tevin Coleman as well and Jarrett McCain. And Jeff Wilson, even though Jr. I don't think he's going to be much involved, but yeah, that is for sure a concern. I think when he's out there, he'll play well though, just because they're very offensive. It's going to be similar to last year, right? Where no matter who the running back was,
I think he's going to get more opportunity than he did last year.
He will get more opportunity than he did last year, but by how much, right? It really just depends where he's going in the draft. But I'm not trying to draft him over some guys in the a James Conner or players
I'd rather draft David Montgomery, who I know is going to get 275 touches, as opposed to Raheem Mostert, who might get 200.
I know you're down on Le'Veon Bell, but would you rather Le'Veon Bell or Raheem Mostert?
I would probably rather.
Don't do it.
It's close. It's really close.
Le'Veon Bell.
I'm sorry. Bell was bad last year efficiency-wise. I'd rather take a more efficient running back.
I know he was bad efficiency-wise last year, but he's going to get the same amount of punches. He was like the RB11 or 12 last year.
The final piece of news we have is Dalvin Cook. They said Dalvin Cook, or the coach, the Minnesota Vikings said that Dalvin Cook was going to report, and he's heard it from the horse's mouth, Dalvin Cook himself. And then his agent refuted the report and said that he was planning to... wait a minute. Dalvin Cook's agent refuted a report that... Oh, okay, he refuted a report that he was planning to report. I was getting it right. I thought I read it wrong. He was refuting a report that he was planning to report to training camp on time for the second time in 3 hours on Saturday evening. So basically his agent is saying that he's not reporting, and he's saying that he's reporting, and everyone's saying that he's reporting. So I don't know what's going on with Dalvin Cook. We'll let you know, and we'll keep that updated.
I just hope I hope they get something done because I own him. It
would be sad if he left. That'll do it for the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Be sure to check out the draft guide. Go buy it. Do all that good stuff. Check our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we will talk to you on Thursday with our running back and wide receiver values.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.